Good morning. We're here for the Santa Rita Board Workshop. Could we start with roll call, please?
Miss Cindy Lopez,
Present.
Ms. Alvariano,
Present.
Ms. Sarah Turner,
Present.
Mr. Jacob Sandoval, and Mr. Neil Patel are not present, but Jacob Sandoval will be joining us shortly.
Thank you. Can we stand for the flag salute, please? Cindy, can you lead us? Ready? Begin. I allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Dr. Alderman, if you could begin with the presentation.
Thank you. This is our annual board workshop. It'll be a little shorter today because we're not doing some of the other pieces. We broke off and did some things separately. So we're going to go over our annual student data. It's like a mid-year check on the data that we have as we're heading into this season of gathering the fresh state assessment data in the spring. So it's kind of a picture of where we are right now, as well as some connections for the actions that we're taking this year to address what we knew going into this year. And so you'll see some reflections back to prior year, as well as where we are at this mid-year check-in, knowing that some of our initiatives, like our reading programs and things, they only really started this fall. And so hopefully we'll continue to see that progress as we move forward. And a lot of the information that you'll see today is going to be presented by our Assistant Superintendent of Ed Services, Miss Becky Moore. And then Dr. Summer Prather-Smith has some additional information about the student data related to discipline, our mental health, and attendance.
Thank you. And I participated in learning walks at all 6 of our schools this week. And so the photos here are fresh from the last few days. So the student is using the new ViewSonic board, demonstrating math for his class. It's really neat to see. So we are going to talk about, excuse me, academic data in ELA and math today, as well as English language or English learner progress. We're going to look at dashboard, but then also at our iReady local data to see, not just look at where we were last spring, but where we are now. We'll talk about what's new in instruction this year, and then Summer will talk about student support, well-being, attendance, and discipline. So again, here are some of our middle schoolers here. They were interacting with text and writing, and then we have some of our first graders doing their Eureka Squared math. This data is dashboard data, and so it is from the spring, so it's not reflective of this year, but prior year. The dashboard was released in late November or early December. And so you can see here that the blue is where we want our students to be. That would be met or exceeded standard. If they are in the lighter gray, they nearly met standard. And so those are students who are approaching grade level. And then the students that we are most concerned about assisting and bringing up are those who are in the dark gray because they did not meet standard and are far below where they should be. So in ELA, we had 26% of our students who met or exceeded standard. And in math, we had 15% last spring. You can see in the center those breakdowns by grade level as well in the columns. And then I'm sure you know this, Cindy, but 3rd grade through 8th grade take the assessments. Kindergarten through 2nd graders don't take these. So looking at that, with a little bit of a different lens, you can see the difference between the previous school year and last school year. There was a bit of a decline in both ELA and math. It's not a huge decline, but it wasn't growth, which was what we would want to see. And the new dashboard looks at average distance from standard. So that's what you see in the lower graph. We would typically want our bars to be going from that 0 point up because they're exceeding standard instead of dropping below it. This shows the breakdown by school. And they're ranked with the highest met or exceeded on top and then ranking down to the lowest. One thing to point out is that McKinnon is the elementary school where all of our, we have 4 SDC classes. 3 of them are mod to severe, 1 is mild mod. New Republic, do they also have 4? They have 4 as well. They're all mild mod.
Is that why we would, those zeros would be reflecting like on McKinnon where,
It's not, those zeros mean that they did not have any students who met or exceeded standard.
okay, so it has
They have
from the same grade levels, 3 to 8, all
3
of
through
them
8.
got, but
Well, at
that,
McKinnon, 3rd through 5th.
I mean, 3 to 5, but
Mhm.
no student at that location met or exceeded.
Correct. Yeah, they had a bit of a decline this year. I think they had more of a decline than the other schools compared to the year before.
So what about those scores? Because what I noticed the difference is like on McKinnon, it's like 3. So is it saying out of 3? What does that score in that yellow?
The one at the last column.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
last
the
column.
last column.
Yeah, it has like I noticed that's like the least. Is it like out of 3? What does that 3 stand for? That score.
The far right. hmm I'm trying to remember. I went over that with Adam when I was preparing the other night, and that one I asked him about too.
I was just wondering because I was wondering like, is it less of something that's being tested? That's why we're seeing that reflection of 0.
I
Because
think-
what I noticed, it's like that's like the scores like the obviously once again the lowest, but I just wanted to know what that score was.
I am going to make sure I give you a correct answer to that by double checking with our data analyst because I had asked the same question and now I don't remember what he told me. So I'll ask that and then I'll send it to you in an email.
Thank you.
I want to say it has something to do with movement on the in the color. Is there a description in there? Thanks. Okay. Looking at this school by school, here from the next level. Okay. Thanks. Okay, so looking at this school by school, Gavilan View, this is their ELA and math. And again, 2 years. Their math, it did decline a little bit. Their ELA declined a little bit more than the math did. Here is JGMS. And it looks like JGMS actually in math increased the number of students who exceeded standard in math. Their blue band altogether is pretty much the same, but they advanced some of those students who were meeting standard. And with La Jolla, relatively similar, a slight decrease in their ELA scores from 22-23 to 23-24. Here's McKinnon. And now I'm questioning those zeros. I think that data might have been off. I went through this so many times, and now I'm looking at these zeros here for overall compared to these. Because I do see some students. I think the other one has something wrong in the data. Because this is showing overall meeting or exceeding as 0.
Has something to do with is this the cohort data around the change in score?
Thanks. Worked so hard to prepare, and now I feel really,
I have a question. And
Yeah.
it's one of those where you get into gray areas. I've noticed in my own teaching that we sort of had the hope as we got farther away from COVID that the information that the children were coming in with would increase. And I'm really not finding that to be the case. And I don't know if it was just, there were still traumatic things happening to them when they were 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. But I'm just wondering how that we can't really necessarily know, but just if that's what teachers are experiencing as well, because to me, it's not gotten to where I feel like the
Right.
cohorts were previous to the pandemic.
well, in conversations with our principals and our TK and kindergarten teachers. Good morning. Our TK teachers and the principals have said that this TK class really seems the most prepared that they've seen in some time. So I think that in the next few years, we're going to see that. But again, that's qualitative. It's not quantitative, right? I just had another thought. This last spring, our 3rd graders really struggled on this assessment. And so a lot of our schools are really focusing in on the 4th graders, knowing that that cohort of students has really struggled just based on, I think, their age and the development during the pandemic.
Thank you.
Right here is New Republic. And they were pretty similar from the previous year to last year. The ELA decreased slightly. And here's Santa Rita Elementary. So that's all last year's data. And so I really am excited to focus more on this year's data because that's in the past. Jacob, I was shared with the other trustees that we had learning walks at all 6 sites this week. So I incorporated photos from this week. So yesterday, those students on iReady, we walked into this kindergarten class. The teacher was assessing students for report card one-on-one with the kindergartners, and the rest of them were busy on iReady, all so focused, and you could hear them like whisper counting 1, 2, 3, 4. There was just throughout the room, they were so engaged. It was awesome.
When did the kinders get access to iReady?
So this year, they started earlier than last year. They did their first assessment in October.
Okay, wow.
I'm hoping next year that they'll be ready to do the kinder iReady diagnostic one with the rest of the grade levels next year.
So starting at the beginning of the year. Okay.
In early September.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so what we're looking at on this chart is school by school, where students are here at the mid-year. This is our winter diagnostic that they took the 2 weeks between Thanksgiving and winter break. Where we would want students to be at this point in the year is 50% because they've had 50% of instruction for the year. And you can see that for the most part, our students are there or close to it. The one that stands out to me is JGMS ELA. And so that's something that their principal and coach are looking at and working with that ELA team on. But for the most part, students are about where they should be. So that's good progress. This is iReady ELA and the percentage of students who are placing mid on the grade level, which is, again, exactly where we want them to be to know that they're going to be successful in mastering their standards for this year. In this one, you'll notice Santa Rita really stood out to me. Oh, and let me make sure you see that the light blue is fall and then the dark blue is winter. So that's showing the growth from where they started to where they are now. So McKinnon had significant growth starting from just 2% to now 9%. Santa Rita is very low. But if I'm going to take you to the appendix quickly, I didn't want to take too long on all the data, so I just added these to reference. Santa Rita. So you can see in this one, even though they are low compared to the other school sites, they made significant growth from fall to winter. And there's that huge band of yellow, which means those students are approaching where they need to be. And so I think that shows that the work that Santa Rita is doing this year is having an impact on student growth because they had decreased that red band of 2 or more grade levels below significantly from fall to winter. Okay, back to where we are. Okay. And then this is the same chart for math, and you can see on the bars it's significantly lower than ELA. So we have had quite a bit of professional development in math this year. But I think that as we are starting to reflect and think about our plans for next year, math is really going to be a focus for us. And I have had our rep with Eureka Math Squared from Great Minds come and do learning walks with me prior to winter break. She's coming back next week to do that again. We were able to visit 3 sites last time, so we'll visit the other 3 sites. And that's really helpful because she's able to look at how the teachers are using the materials and instructing and give us input on how to tweak that to really maximize the student learning.
Just really quickly, what are the percentages? This is number of students placing mid
Mid
level.
on level. So that means this is the percentage of students who are midway. We're 50% through the year. So they are at that 50% of their learning growth for the year.
Okay.
Becky, can you go back to the, because we're not looking at apples to apples for just a second. Can you go back to the iReady, the one that was the median progress towards typical growth? I just
Yes.
want to explain to them
Thank
why
you.
that's not the same. No.
Whoops, I went too far.
Yep.
That
Okay,
one.
if you look at this,
Mhm.
what that 50% means is that the children moved like what would be a half of a grade level's worth of work in a year. In other words, like if you were at beginning 4th grade level, you've moved to like the midpoint of 4th grade level. It's like 1 year of growth in 1 year. But then could you go to the next slide? This is different because this is how far you get to where we ideally wanted you to be. In other words, if you're a 6th grader and on the previous slide at third grade level, beginning third grade level, you could say in half of the year, did you move to the middle of third grade level? You're still 2.5 years behind where you are. So it's not apples to apples in terms of the other one is like, yes, you've made like half a year's of growth in a year. The other ones that the tables are going way down. We're now looking at like 13 or 16% because those children who are 2 or 3 years behind, they're moving. They're moving, still 2 or 3 years behind where they're supposed to be.
So a growth target, thank you, Sarah, in iReady is if they make typical growth, that's 1 year's growth in 1 year's time from wherever they are. So a third grader at kindergarten level who makes typical growth is going to bring themselves up to first grade level, not to third grade. We also have stretch growth targets that work towards closing that gap. So we have several students who are working on stretch growth so that they can make more than 1 year's growth in 1 year's time in order to close that achievement gap. So like Sarah said, this is the percentage of students who are actually making that 1 year's growth in 1 year's time, whereas these are the students, if they are mid on grade level, that means they're working at their grade level standard. Oh, who has been with us? That was that yellow.
Oh.
No, thank you.
I have a question, Becky, going back with our math and, like you said, something that we'll have, take a look at it and work, but I know that we used to offer, and I guess that's my question, are we still offering that support for parents? Because I think, that's very important. A lot of times, obviously school, the students are here learning, but then I always say it's a dual thing, parents have to be on board as much. But I know that sometimes parents struggle, especially like I remember my child in elementary once, like, how do you do this? And it was second grade or third grade. And I was like, wait, this is not how because it's a different way of how I learned, math. And I know they were giving like classes like to help and like to try to understand. Are we still doing that for parents? Like kind of that support to make sure that the parents know how to instruct the kids at home and actually help out with homework, not just for the kids come to school, learn what they can on their own and then go home and are completely not getting that support. And obviously we have a lot of students that, a lot of parents probably don't have like I said, even myself, I clearly remember once, and I think it was second grade or third grade, but the way they wanted her to do it was like, I don't understand this. So I'm just wondering, do we still have that? Are we still doing that, or did we discontinue that? What are we doing with making sure that the parents also have that support to make sure that it doesn't just end at school, but once they go home, they're able to retain the information they gained that day and are,
Ideally, and it doesn't always happen, students wouldn't take home homework that they cannot complete independently. That's number one. I mean, homework for practice, students should have the skills to do it independently without help because we know that not all students have access to parents who know how to do these things. But we have had math nights at every school site this year. We just had one at McKinnon this week.
Yeah,
They just had it.
yeah.
It was Wednesday. Yeah. So yeah, we are providing support. I don't know that that's a direct correlation to like the work that they're doing in the moment. But we are, working on engaging parents with what students are learning.
And I've also worked with some of our partners. So our Mixteco program is working with parents around math and math access, and then migrants also working. They had doing a Saturday math academy, and then they led a family math night 2 weeks ago where they invited families in, and then they're focusing their parent workshop around math because we're seeing decrease overall. Used to be that our migrant students did better in math than most students. So we're seeing a decline there too. So I've been able to work with them and they're doing a focused effort around math too. So they're doing Saturdays right now for math.
Okay, I wanted to share these slides just as a reference to show that how our students perform in iReady as far as students who meet their mid to on grade level, how that correlates to their SBAC assessment at the end of the year. So this is from last year. And you can see in the scattergram all of those dots clustered together because there is a high correlation between their iReady performance and their SBAC performance. So for ELA in elementary, that was 83% of scores matched. And for math, it was 88%. So for middle school, 79% and 90%. 80% is what would be considered a high correlation and validity. So when we're looking at this year's iReady, actually, let me go back to these quickly and seeing where students are now. If they continue to make this progress, make the progress towards their growth, those mid to on grade level students are going to do well on the SBAC test. And so showing their growth, I also wanted to point out that last year, in 23-24, we had the growth from fall to winter. That was about, what'd you say, like 18 to 22%? Does it look like 4 or 5% growth? Compared to this year, where we had 10% growth. So what we're doing this year is making a difference in increasing students' growth. They started lower, they made greater growth, yeah.
Part of the reason they start higher because what they lose over the summer oftentimes happen, or
Well,
Um,
this is fall, the light blue is last fall and then this previous fall. And so the students, I mean, we saw that decline in SBAC data. The students are just performing at lower levels, this 3rd through 8th grade band, than the year before. Similarly with math, even though it's not where we want it to be yet, but we can see again, they started lower this year than they did previously. And at the mid-year, they're higher. So I feel optimistic that we're going to see growth this year instead of continue to decline. We're going to start turning that around. Moving in, oh, go ahead.
Want to make a comment about that?
Mhm.
I think you will too. We also have to consider the fact they change the test significantly from year to year. So it's not apples to apples in
Right.
terms of even the length of the test, how many questions are asking the kids, what are they having them do. They've not gotten to a point where it's been very standard from year to year, like what the test looks like.
Mhm.
Just a little bit. So ideally, because we always, in education, we always talk about closing the gap, right? So no matter where, if you look at the light blue, that's whoever's walking in your door, right? Every year. And so if you're looking at the dark blue, our goal every year would continue to have that dark blue be farther and farther out, regardless of where they came in as a light blue, right at the start of the year. I know that's like really boiling it down to be simple, but that's when we talk about we've got to start making more than 1 year's growth in 1 year. That's what that is, right? You're pushing that out farther and farther each year. And, Becky was sharing earlier, like anecdotally, our teachers are like, oh, now our primary grade students are coming in a little bit more ready than we've seen in the last 4 years. And so as that continues up, but for our student, we have to consider our students who are taking the SBAC and that correlation, those for us, right? Then the high school district has their own, right, that got pushed up with that gap that was generated with COVID and all of those things, right? And so as a cohort, as a group of those highly impacted grade levels are traveling up and up, that's the most challenging, to keep pushing that dark blue out even farther. And every grade level, we have to do that, or we're never going to get them close enough to the other edge.
Yeah. I also want to share that in our data analysis after the winter diagnostic, we identified specific lists of students from each school who have the potential to be mid-on level or meet stretch growth. And so I shared that with principals and coaches who are working with teachers to have individual data chats with students. And I saw in classrooms this week, there are, goals posted, and there is an emphasis on pushing the students who can really get there to do that, giving them some extra incentives. And so I'm hoping that also excites the students because they want to do well, right? And so if we can give them that individual pep talk of you can do this, you're going to be exactly where you need to be if you can work hard and do these things, and we're here to support you. I think that students are going to be excited to rise to the occasion. So this is a snapshot of our English learners in the district. The TBD are students who have come into our district, are still working on their initial test because they are late starters to the school year. But we currently have in the district 1,315 English learners. The RFEP monitored are students who have reclassified and are still in the monitoring phase, where teachers are keeping tabs on them, making sure they're successful in that reclassification. And then fully exited means they have been monitored for 2 years and they are completely exited. 4 years, 2 years, 4 years. Thanks. And then IFEP means they came in as new students to us at any grade level, new to our schools, took the test and initially placed fluent English. We have 1,166 English only students. LTELs are students that we want to pay special attention to. And so those are students who are long-term English learners. We would have expected them to reclassify by now, but they have not. So we have 49 of those, and unfortunately 328 who are at risk of that. So those are students that we want to really boost and hope to reclassify before they fall into that category. And then 155 newcomers, which is higher this year than we've seen in previous years. And they're coming in at all grade levels. And so teachers are really developing their skills in working with English learners this year in ways that they haven't previously. And then 219 of our English learners also have IEPs. Our highest number of English learners is at Santa Rita. That's where our highest concentration is. They have over 450.
Do we still have a process for redesignation for children who are ELs that are basically, it's difficult to reclassify because it's
Yes.
of the disability? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we do. And we're our English language, our EL specialists in our last meeting a couple of weeks ago was looking again at our reclassification criteria to make sure we're all in agreement and in alignment and that it's working for our students.
Just real quick to clarify what Sarah's question was. So we have some students who maybe they're on an IEP and their disability, they're not able to take the general summative LPAC, and so they take an alternative. And so for them, depending on what their disability is, the exiting or RFEPing criteria for them is different to meet those needs. So if a student had a severe speech impediment, on the speaking section of the LPAC, what either accommodations or excusal from different things could happen for that student based on their disability, so that they're not kept from being able to RFEP because of something that is out of their control. So how are we reflecting their appropriate English language progress and being able to have an RFEP criteria for them as well? So we work really closely. I know, Becky, with the our EL specialist, and then our SPED program manager, Stephanie Mullenhop. She leads a lot of the alternative assessment pieces with her staff for like just for our general SBAC and alternative assessments there, as well as for LPAC alternative.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and LPAC is in progress right now, our summative. Stephanie worked really closely with our EL specialists to make sure that any accommodations that were needed, even for students without IEPs, there are some supports, designated supports that can be put into place for those students if we know that they have specific needs. So we are working on that. We will have results before the end of the school year, so we will hope to reclassify more students before we leave for summer vacation. And we will put our biggest focus on our fifth graders and eighth graders, because if they can reclassify before they get to their next school, they'll have more opportunity. Here are our trends over time for summative LPAC. So we want our students to be in that purple band. That means that they progressed at least one English progress level. If they are in blue, those are English learners who maintained at level 4. And typically when they reach level 4, that's when we're looking to reclassify students. And so if they maintained in level 4, it may be something with their academic performance in class and reading that might be holding them back from reclassifying, because typically those 4s are the ones that we would target to move on. The green band, those are students who maintained levels 1, 2, or 3. And the pink is where we don't want to have any students. That is students who decreased in their progress level. We do have between 2019 and 22 a gap because the LPAC was not administered during those years of the pandemic. And that also impacts this. You can see those light blue bands for school year 22-23. We were making up reclassifications that were, not being able to be done during those prior years. But these are rates of reclassification by school site over 3 years. And the orange is this year to date, but we will have another reclassification window before the end of the school year.
So it was large because you were catching up on.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense.
So again, with Santa Rita having the highest number of English learners, our hope would be that they're going to have the most reclassifications. So that's something that we're really digging into with them. All right, here are some of our new implementations this year. We adopted UFly and Heggerty as supplements to our ELA. UFly has more of a phonics focus. Heggerty has phonemic awareness and phonics. So what we did is asked the schools to really use those materials as they thought would best fit their student needs. And we're going to assess after this year kind of how each school did with that and determine what that will look like next year. So you can see how each elementary school is using these two programs. These programs are typically for students at the elementary level. They address foundational skills, and so they're not programs that would be used at the middle school level. Okay, and then these are the ways that Heggerty and phonics for reading are being used for intervention. So that is supporting students who should know, have these skills developed by 3rd grade. But if they don't, we want to give them targeted support to close those gaps in understanding how phonics works, how words are put together. And so they're being used Haggerty in third grade for small group interventions. And then phonics for reading is a third through eighth grade intervention. And so it's being used in fourth and fifth grade at most of the elementary schools, also at third grade in Santa Rita. At Gavilan View, we tried to use it for their reading lab course for that intervention. The students there were too high for this program. It's because they have they can sound out words and read them, but they don't comprehend. And so we need to find something that would better support with the comprehension skills, which is that next level. Once you can sound them out, you need to understand what you're reading. And so they did find that it's useful in ELD and with their special ed students. And so it's being used there. We also implemented English 3D last year, fourth through eighth grade, and this year, kindergarten through third grade. These students are doing some partner talking, and they had to look at me when they see my camera come out. They're like, wait, what's she doing? They were so cute when they know exactly that they need to make eye contact. They got to tell each other what they prefer. Do you prefer ice cream or popsicles? That kind of thing.
I'm gonna shout out Becky just a little bit here because on our learning walks this week, she took Claudia and Rosa out, which are two positions that it's always great for them to see what is your work all about. And so they totally enjoyed themselves going on those learning walks. That was Becky's idea and she brought the team.
Like, come on, you guys need to know. Come on, money bags.
That's a great idea. I like that.
Rosa's greatest excitement, her greatest thrill was the new playground structure at Santa Rita. Yeah, these students, and then after they share with each other, they say, thank you for sharing your idea. So cute. I got in trouble because I did say it, but I guess she was so excited that I was talking to her that she didn't quite catch that I said it. And she said, you're supposed to say thank you for sharing your idea. And I said, oh, I said it, but I'll say it again. This program really incorporates the 4 domains of the English language: reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And you know, in ELA, we have a bigger tendency to focus on the reading and writing, but the speaking and listening is also so crucial. And so this program is really good at teaching explicitly how to do that. And so we have 30 minutes of designated ELD time in kindergarten through 5th grade for our English learners. And then in middle school, English learners have 1 period of ELD each day. And this new curriculum has definitely increased the adherence to the scheduled designated ELD time because teachers know what to do with it.
Yeah, a trainer that I had in the past said, reading and writing is a boat that floats on the ocean of listening and speaking.
Yes. Yeah.
Again?
Reading and writing is a boat that floats on the ocean of listening and speaking.
Mhm.
So basically, if the children don't have any awareness of what these words mean, any understanding, you can teach them how to decode. There's nothing there.
Yeah, and I do see communication especially important because I do meet sometimes at an older age and expressing stuff like that and organizing your thoughts. So that's really good.
Yeah. And on that note, I mean, this is not ELD, but also from the learning walks. So timely that we did them this week. We were in a 1st grade classroom at Santa Rita the other day, and they were doing writing, and they were writing a sequence of events. So they had 1 page for each step. They were using transition words first, next, then last, talking about their morning routine. And they were drawing the pictures first, right, before they write to get their ideas down. And the students could tell, they would look at their pictures and tell me using those complete sentences, first, my mom wakes me up. Next, I put on my clothes. Then I eat my cereal. Like, it was
Yeah.
great. It was great. The other thing that's new this year is the implementation of our scope and sequence plans. And we recently had district-wide PLC Plus meetings. And so all the first grade teachers got together, all the second grade, all the middle school ELA, et cetera. They took notes because our scope and sequence revision team is about to come together and start working on the revisions of these. These were our first draft, and now we've used them a year, so we're going to make some tweaks for next year. So they took some notes about what worked, what needs some adjusting for next year to help their team member who's going to make those revisions. And so what I clipped here are 7th and 8th grade math and 5th grade ELA, and you can see their notes about how those worked out for them. And I've heard feedback throughout the year that teachers are really appreciative of having this because they feel like they know what's expected. They know what outcomes they're expected to produce in student learning so that students will be successful in the next grade. I also had a 6th grade math teacher tell me that she has taught more math units this year than ever before because she knows what the expectation is. So that was exciting to hear. All right, Summer.
We want to just go straight into it?
Or do you, yeah.
Okay, so I'm trying to decide, do I want to look at my screen or look here? So when we're really looking at overall student support and well-being, our focus within those strategic priorities is mental health through SEL implementation at all levels. And as you know, we implemented Second Step across all of our classrooms. Previously, Second Step was being used by our counselors only, which meant that only students who were getting counseling services were getting that SEL time. So we purchased Second Step and implemented across all classrooms in the district. Right now, there's a 20-minute block at each elementary period in which they're able to do Second Step curriculum. And what that has shown us is that we've seen a decrease in referrals for more of that Tier 1 SEL need to our counselors, which has freed our counselors to be able to provide the next higher level, more Tier 2 type supports for our students. The benefit of Second Step is that the lessons are completely done for teachers. They log in, everything's there for them, ready for them to use. You'll see a usage report linked in there. You can look at kind of how it's been used, and it's going by units. So teachers can go directly unit by unit, or if they're noticing a challenge within their classroom or maybe out on the playground, they can skip to a different unit and use that unit to reinforce those skills. So you may see some usage where it's like they did unit 1 and 2, and then all of a sudden there's a high percentage of usage in unit 5 overall. We also did run into a little snag. I review these usage reports every couple weeks to make sure that everybody's utilizing the program, and the usage was really low. And so met with principals and kind of said, can you check in, like what's going on? If you've ever used Second Step, when you finish it, you have to hit a button that says complete. If you don't hit that button, it doesn't register that they've completed the unit. So many of our teachers had been using it, but not hitting complete and going to the next unit. So they were able to go in and fix that, which was good to know. Yeah. Yeah, because the students were, when I was checking in with students, they were reinforcing its usage, but the usage reports weren't showing that. So oftentimes what it reinforced is that it's something small and clerical that we can do. So we've seen improvements in the implementation. What we're looking at now, we have upcoming on April 4th, I'm meeting with our elementary counseling team to put together a counseling scope and sequence, very similar to what Becky's been doing with academics, so that it's really clear for our school sites throughout the year what the focus will be. Counseling is a challenging area because a lot of what happens in counseling services can't be shared. And so, as you know, something that's not really visible is oftentimes perceived as not occurring. And so for our counselors, they've really struggled with wanting to meet all the needs, but also wanting to provide quality service for students. And so what we determined as a team was, by laying out that scope and sequence, which would lay out for the year what groups they're going to run,
and I'll talk a little bit about how we're making those determinations, as well as the spaces that they have and the time they have available to provide individual support to students who may need individual support. That's a great visual for our teachers to be able to see, like, Sarah has a need. There's not a spot right now, but there's a spot coming up, right? And so it's not, no, I'm not seeing Sarah. It's, here's the spot where that is. That doesn't take into account crisis interventions, right? They're always going to put crisis intervention first. But we need to have a plan because it can be really easy to pull counselors away from what they're doing. So there's a challenge happening with a student, the counselor's getting pulled into that challenge, which means all of those students who they were set to see aren't getting seen. And so they're not getting the support they need, and then we're seeing it escalate. So through that scope and sequence, we'll be able to present at the beginning of the year a clear plan that I think will bring some visibility to our counseling team as well. We also got a grant, so I work with CSUMB through Project Reach, which is all free services to us, which is great. And we were able to partner through our collaboration with Project Reach with Safe First Steps, which is out of the University of Chicago, Champaign. And they have been working with schools throughout Chicago for many years around the implementation. And so we love bringing something that's already been proven somewhere else and implementing here. That link in there is a little bit of information about what that is. I do have printouts from our others. You're free to take them or not. Some people want paper. But you'll see here in this link down at the bottom in that presentation, just kind of what's happening overall. So we chose 2 sites. We chose Gavilan View. We could only choose 2 sites. So we chose Gavilan View and Santa Rita. They're our most at-need sites, and they feed to each other as our focus. And so they went through 2 days of training just around trauma-informed practices and trauma-informed schools. They did some data collection and some surveys. The team came from Chicago, and we did some site walks. It's also linked in there, but it's here. It's just the feedback that came from the teachers' self-evaluations, as well as some feedback from those site walks. Then they used that to set some strategic priorities around focusing on what they would address at each site. Then in partnership with CSUMB and an entire team of school psychologists, which is amazing. So we have 7 school psychologists supporting at Gavilan View and 8 school psychologists supporting at Santa Rita, on top of 2 Dr. Kathy Draper Rodriguez from CSUMB and Dr. Jill Talley from CSUMB, who are leading those teams. They're coming in, and at Gavilan View, based on our data analysis, we found that our students who are being most impacted are special education students. We're seeing higher rates of suspension and discipline referral. So we decided to really focus in on that population. And so what they did is they came, they met with the SPED team, they met with the administration, and then we looked at a cohort of students in our SDC classrooms. So they're going in. So 2 school psychologists are going into each SDC classroom. And then we looked at students who have an IEP who are mainstreaming. And then we identified the teachers who they were going to support in that mainstream population. So what they were able to do is come in and look at both physical environment. So they have funding to help create, for example, calm down spaces or mindfulness spots for students so that they have a space, helping students, teachers to redesign the classroom environment to minimize trauma. And then, so they're doing a big focus in SDC around that, really creating spaces that are going to support those students. Then going into those other classrooms and supporting those students around, those teachers around taking data around behavior of students, what's happening, positive reinforcement efforts. And then afterwards, they meet with those teachers and coach them around, here's some of the things we saw, here's some practices that can be implemented. They are meeting once a month at each site. Then teachers can also sign up for additional consultation. So if a teacher says, hey, I know there's a focus on this, this, and this at this site, but I really want to know more about that. During their time that they're there, they can sign up for additional consultation, and the team will go over and support any teacher who's interested. So we've had 1 consultation visit this last month, and it went really well. Teachers were really positive about the support. Who doesn't want a team of 8 school psychologists, right? These are year 2s coming in to provide additional support. And so I'm optimistic that we're going to see some real benefit out of this and hoping that we can continue that work with CSUMB. What'll happen is Chicago's team will kind of fade out because that's far away, but they'll have trained the CSUMB team. And then our hopes would be that we can continue that work with them as well.
These two handouts are what you have
Yes,
there.
so that's
Okay.
the presentation, that link down at the bottom, and then the second is the data collection. And then I didn't print the usage report because it's a really long Excel sheet.
This is
Boring.
really exciting because at times people don't understand how little things make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
And sometimes I know when you make recommendations, we're like, well, I don't see a big issue. Like,
Yeah.
but it's like it can because
Yeah.
we just see it through our own lens as opposed to how somebody else might interpret it. So that's
Yeah.
super exciting.
And just the additional support. I mean, our school psychs have a lot going on. So having a team of year twos to be there, and then just being able to implement, again, we're very different than Chicago in lots of ways, right? But though there's areas of Chicago where we have similar, but we've seen what's worked for kids through this work. So yeah, that's exciting. All right. So we also are continuing with our mental health screenings, also a grant. So we're not paying for this. We got a partnership. And again, we pulled in CSUMB. So I'm trying to utilize our local university as much as possible. So we use the tool called Check Yourself. If you remember last year, we did Gavilan View 6th graders, and our hope is to continuously kind of expand as we get better at understanding how to respond appropriately. So that link at the top there is just for you to kind of review what Check Yourself is. It'll take you through some sample questions as well. We conducted the universal screener at John Gutierrez on October 10th, and we targeted 7th grade there. And so you'll see kind of what this looks like overall. So that top rectangle, there were 144 students who completed the universal mental health screener. We send home a permission slip prior to, it's like reverse permission, like a lot of ours. So if parents don't want their students to participate, they're able to let us know, and then students don't take that. We give them an alternative placement during this time. We had only two students who didn't take the universal screener. Some students were absent, but so 144 students participated. That 75 means we identify key areas of that are called flags where we're going to provide an immediate intervention. So there's, depending on the level of that, there's green, yellow, and red. Red means we're doing something right away. So 75 students had no flags, meaning they're doing golden based on this, right? We had 40 students who had tier 2 or yellow flags. Going back to my previous comment around creating that scope and sequence for counselors, this is part of what's going to help us. We know that those areas, which I'll show you a little bit, in that tier 2 is where our counselors should be focusing. We know that we have data that says, okay, this group of students needs this tier 2. Those 75 students need that tier 1. They need that daily SEL to make sure that they're continuing to have growth and progress. But those 40, they have specific needs. And so what this does is provide us with a focus and a place to start so that our counselors and social workers aren't just kind of pulling at what they've always done or guessing at what students need overall. And then we had 29 students in that tier 3 level. Those students may be working with our site counselor, but they also would be students that we would be referring to our general education Monterey County behavioral health support as well. Any student who's a tier 3 with red flags, we give an immediate screening to. So we have that whole team, our entire mental health team, as well as an entire team from CSUB. Our Harmony at Home Sticks and Stones counselors are there. Our MCBH team is there so that anybody with a red gets an immediate check-in to make sure they're doing okay. And then, so the bottom is just the percentage of that. So 52% of our students golden, and 20% of our students have a fairly high level of need, which we see reflected, I'm not presenting it here today, in our California Healthy Kids Survey, very much correlated together. Then at the bottom, there's specific screeners that we're looking for around depression, anxiety, isolation. And so you'll see there that when we're looking at the depression screener, a high percentage of our students, 117, I can't see that far, I'm not looking at my screen, students were negative for a depression screener. Great, that's what we want to see. And then we saw around 20 students be positive and then nothing there. Same thing with our anxiety screener. 113 students did not mark any areas that identified with anxiety. And then we had, I think that's 24 students. And then same thing with isolation. So you'll see that there's for positive isolation, they flip-flopped it just because that number is higher. So there's about 7 students around isolation. And those are questions around like having somebody to connect with at school, a meaningful adult. So those are students. Now, what we can do, this screening is completely anonymous to everybody except the person who controls it, which is me. Everybody can see this data, but they can't see who it is. Students get an individual link that's connected to their student ID number that we send out to them. So I can click on, for example, those 17% of our students that tested positive or that their test showed positive for anxiety. I can click on that and I know exactly who those students are. So then that's what helps us to identify. And then to the right side as well, you'll see, let me make it big on mine because I can't see on either one. On the right side there, you'll just see some of those key areas. So self-harm, suicidal thoughts, feeling safe, ever tried to kill themselves, feels harassed or threatened, tries to control their weight. That's a big one we look at because we can run groups around that area as well. Drank alcohol, used cigarettes or tobacco, used a vaping device, and then likelihood of smoking cigarettes. Again, for those students who have indicated red for self-harm, we're able to do an instant screening with them. So we identify who those are. I assign, they go in teams. So it's one of our counselors or social worker with one either CSUMB or Harmony at Home person as well to do that screener. At this John Gutierrez screening, we did have 4 students that required mobile crisis support or intervention, 1 student who was transported. So just to kind of reverse on how it works. So we do a screening. We use the Columbia screener for suicide risk assessment. We complete the Columbia. That gives us anywhere from a low to moderate high to high risk area. If a student goes between moderate to moderate high to high, we reach out to Mobile Crisis, which is through the Kinship Center. Mobile Crisis comes out. They do their own evaluation of that student as well. They're the only ones besides law enforcement who can make a decision about transporting student to a medical facility. So what we've done is we've shortened our screener. Previously, we did a really long screener, and what we found was that students were going through the really long screener with us, then going through the really long screener with Mobile Crisis. Then they get to Natividad and they're doing it again. And it was too much for students. So we worked with those 2 entities to determine like what's the minimum you need from us to be able to reach out to you so that you can conduct your full screening. So we all agreed on the Columbia, and I've been training all of our site staff, teachers included, yard supervisors around giving the Columbia. It's a really common screening that's used in education. It's used in police, military as well. It has 8 questions, and so it gets to the point pretty quickly so that the full can be implemented. So 1 student was transported for some additional support overall. If you remember when we did GV, we were really surprised at a couple of the students who came forward because they weren't on anybody's radar. I don't know if it's good or bad, but this time the students who came forward were students who we had been watching. So we were aware of those students. We have our next Gavilan View Universal Screener coming up on February 27th. So on Thursday, we'll be doing the screening at Gavilan View. We originally were going to screen the 7th graders because we did the 6th graders last year. So we're like, oh, let's see them as 7th grade. But based on our California Healthy Kids Survey data dives, we found that our 8th graders were really struggling. Like they kind of were that older student that we maybe forgot about a little bit. But their indicators on that California Healthy Kids Survey told us we needed to check in with them. And so we switched our screening to target our 8th graders because we just want to, their scores were a little concerning. in some of those areas related to mental health. And so we decided to do those 8th graders. We thought about trying to take on 7th and 8th, but it's too much and we don't want to overdo our team. After the JGMS training, I did send our counselors and social workers on a little like half-day retreat to Somalis because it's a heavy load, right? They're doing maybe 15 suicide risk assessment trainings. Those can take a lot of time to do. It's hard work. And so we were able to send them over to Del Monte Beach, I think it was at, and they led for us kind of a mindfulness session, a regrouping, a grounding, just to kind of make sure that we're taking care of them as well in this process. So they want to do equine therapy for the next one. So we'll see if we can, we'll see if I can get that for them after the Gavel and View training on the 27th.
Summer, I just have a question.
Yeah.
So thank you for explaining, because you kind of answered some of the questions I had about how it works.
Yeah.
But for these kids that are in red,
Yeah.
automatic flags, like you said, you're able to identify. And so the first step, once you guys assess them there, let's say kid answered, but he doesn't.
They're not an immediate risk.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I guess my question's more of like, well, whether they are or not.
Yeah.
How, obviously we're going to work with these kids,
Yeah.
and whatnot, but what do we do when it comes down to parents bringing them in and them being, because this is confidential, obviously,
Yeah.
until a point, it's not.
Absolutely.
When do they get notified? When do we bring them into the picture, and how are they?
Yeah. So parents, any student who goes through an evaluation with our team on that day, parents are notified immediately. So we let the parents know. Anybody who we're calling mobile crisis, parents have to be present. So parents are aware. But our team, anybody who receives intervention from our team, a parent is automatically called. So that's part of why they divide into 2. So they don't call the parent until they've initially met with the student. So they'll pull the student in because they don't want to frighten the parents yet either. So that's why they go into a team of 2. So while they're doing that initial evaluation, they're kind of taking notes. They'll coordinate with each other, and then one of them will give the parent a call and let them know, we met with Cindy, we evaluated her, she's come out low risk, but we just wanted to let you know why. Or we've met with Cindy, we're on the fence a little bit. Is there anything you want to share with us that's been happening? That will give us more information before we go to the next step. But they're included all along the way.
Yeah. Thank you.
Summer, I had a question just going back to second
Yeah.
step. You mentioned 20 minutes. Is that 20 minutes a week, 20 minutes a day? What is that 20 minutes?
Yeah, they have 20 minutes a day in their daily schedule kind of set in there. I think, if we're being realistic, other things happen and it takes us, it sometimes gets taken over by something else. But as the principals work to kind of lay out the minutes for each area, they did designate 20 minutes a day for SEL.
Thank you.
Okay, attendance and chronic absenteeism. So thank you all for approving Dr. Katisa's position for both ELOP, and she also oversees our attendance. We have updated everything we have for attendance and really started to look at the data surrounding our attendance. Again, I have it here, but you'll see it linked there. If you want a copy, it's here. This is our action plan that she wrote around addressing chronic absenteeism. And so some of the goals that we really had around that is, so attendance has been interesting. And as we look at some of the data, I'll kind of share why in a minute. But attendance was interesting because coming back from the pandemic, remember, we went from mandatory quarantines of 10 days to 5 days so we saw the rates of absenteeism, were high because students were not allowed to come to school based on parameters. However, it still counts towards chronic absenteeism, which is missing more than 10% of your school year, right? So 180 days, you miss 18 days, you're chronically absent. If you had to quarantine twice in a school year, right, that's 20 days right there, you're chronically absent. So we saw really high rates of chronic absenteeism during the mandatory quarantine period. It's important to know with chronic absenteeism, it doesn't matter if it's excused, unexcused illness. It's just about, I missed more than 10% of my school day or my school year or up to where we are. The reason that's important and what we've been working a lot with parents around when we're addressing chronic absenteeism is it doesn't matter why a student's out, right? It's not that it's not valid. It's that they've missed whatever's been taught, So that's really our issue around addressing chronic absenteeism, is making sure that our students have a way to get whatever they missed during that time. So we wanted to improve attendance, we wanted to reduce chronic absenteeism, and then we wanted better academic performance, because we knew if students are at school in their seat or getting access to the learning they missed in another way, Saturday Academy, for example, that we're going to have improved academic outcomes overall. So lots of collaboration with parents and guardians to really help them understand what chronic absenteeism is and why it's important. Connecting with our community resources, specifically our district attorney, as well as with Centro for some of our work with our Mixteco parents. And then doing some of those positive outreach, really reinforcing for our students and our families when students are coming to school as well. And then some of that data and accountability, we're utilizing attention to attendance, so regularly monitoring attendance rates, communicating out very early on. So we're not waiting till a student's chronically absent, but we're communicating with our liaisons. At 3 absences, we're doing a home visit to help parents understand the impacts of the next absent. Building the capacity of our staff, both in that front office as well in our classroom, and then looking at our data to kind of make those contiguous or continuous improvements. So I want to first talk about that percentage of change, why that's important. It's a different number of students that we're looking at, so that's why that's not percentage to percentage. So you'll see kind of overall. We want negatives in this column. We want chronic absenteeism to go down. So you can kind of see the 23, 24, that's the percent of students who are chronically absent at each of those sites. No surprise, our middle school tends to be a little bit higher. And you'll see that McKinnon and New Republic are also higher. And that has to do with our special education students. I didn't put it on here, but our special education students are one of our populations that have a higher level of chronic absenteeism. Dr. Katis is really working right now with that team around like what it's in parents, around what it's related to. Many of our students, especially in our mod severe, get sick more often. And so it really is related to illness. So putting some protections into place there.
They also have more doctor's appointments.
Exactly. Yeah, more doctor's appointment. So when we looked at who those students are, because again, we can dive down to the student level, we know that special education is a piece of that. One of the changes that we're making for next year is our district social worker is also going to really focus in on special ed, both for mental health support. So he's going to provide targeted mental health support to our special education students. And we know that some of the areas that we saw for our special education students not attending was related to mental health. So we said, okay, students aren't attending because of their mental health. What support can we put into place? And then we decided to redesignate our district social worker to target that population of student and be a direct link for our students so we can make sure that they have access at all times. So overall, you can see we're doing great. Those numbers are going down. We want that percentage of change to go down. Santa Rita's is the lowest, but you'll notice it's the lowest because they started low kind of to begin with. So Santa Rita students are coming to school. We love that for them and us. Student discipline. So you'll see on here as well, this is our overall student discipline rates. So that first orange is suspensions by month. October was a rough month for our kiddos, but that's the number of suspensions that have happened by month. And then, excuse me, and then on the other side is non-assertive discipline data. So what this means is this is the discipline that's not resulting in a suspension or an expulsion. So the orange are suspensions. The blue are discipline that are non-assertive. So these are discipline entries that the teachers are entering into ARIES. So maybe, they implemented an intervention in their classroom, but it was important enough that they noted it in ARIES. What happens is that anytime a discipline entry occurs in ARIES, our alternative to suspension and our restorative practice TOSA get an email for all discipline entries. They keep a giant log of all of those because their goal is to intervene before those students end up in that orange table, right? So they want to identify students who are having chronic behavior challenges that are resulting in a discipline entry so they can go in, do some case management and support, and hopefully not lead to a suspension overall. So currently, right now, the good news with that is that we only had 8 out of 84 suspensions that resulted in recidivism, right? That a student was suspended more than one time, which is a pretty good number overall. So we know that the case management that's happening by our restorative practice TOSA and our alternative to suspension teacher, speech therapy there, myself, is having an impact, right? So that's what we want to see. We want to see positive data for the interventions that we're putting into place. When we look at when I look at what we look like compared to the state overall and the county, there's a report that, oops, I put it at the bottom in the attachments, but it's not there. But we look good. So when we look at what does our suspension data look like compared to Monterey County, the only area where we have more suspensions than the county overall is with our white students, and we know that based on the dashboard last year. And then all other areas, like we're doing overall better than the state and the county, which is something that we want to see happening. We want to see less suspensions. We are predicting an increase for this year and what it looked like in the dashboard. And that has to do with our middle school sites. Our middle school sites are still really struggling during that lunch and break period. We know that there needs to be more or something different. During our student listening circles, students shared with us that they want alternative activities that, because of the way our scheduling is, we can't kind of stagger that. So you're talking about 500 students out at the same time. I don't know how many supervisors you need, 500, to kind of do that. But what kids said is like, we want something else to be able to do. We want to go in and just read a book and be quiet. We want to go play a game. We want to do an art class or a music class. And so we're really working with looking at like, how can we make that happen? Teachers have a duty-free lunch, so we can offer to let them open their classrooms during that period of time, and we can compensate them for that. So that's one place. I mean, that's always going to be an option out there. But we're also looking at, can we bring in the music program to do a lunchtime club, right? Can we bring in Artist Inc. or can we bring in a local artist to run some of those so that we have consistency for students? So we're really looking at how do we address what the data is telling us is that breaks and lunch at the middle school are a challenge overall for student discipline.
That's when you start seeing more of the issues kind of come up is
Like 80% of the middle school suspensions are taking place during passing period or lunch after school.
And I like to just emphasize where like we are doing some of that stuff
Mhm.
already. Like when I went to both of
Yeah.
the locations for lunch, there was some teachers that had their
Yep.
doors open.
Mhm.
The music at
JJ.
John Gutierrez
Mhm.
was also on there. So
Yeah.
we are doing some of that stuff.
It's just enough. Yeah, we have the clubs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
And
Sir?
I appreciate that, but if staggered lunch is a goal, that seems to me an achievable goal to me.
Yeah.
I know it's happening in other places, so
We looked at it a lot this year. The challenge that we're facing is PE and space, like where they're going to have it. So it's something that we'll continue. It's not off the table. We continue to look at. We spend a lot of time kind of looking at the schedule and how can it go. And because there's not what some of the other sites have is like their yard is separate from where their classrooms are built. And for us, it would mean that kids were out at break and recess at the same time that some classrooms were in session, just kind of the design of our spaces. So we're continuing to look at it as an option. It's more a design challenge of where would you have students go? Because we don't want to keep them in a cafeteria for 40 minutes. And so just kind of the layout of our middle schools make it challenging, but they're continuing to look at it as well, how it might work.
okay. And I do apologize that they have a hard stop at 10, but
Yeah.
I just want to say that I mean it's good that we're looking at it's an issue, but it's look that we have solutions
Yeah.
that we're kind of looking at. So
For sure.
thank you,
And I
Rita.
think that's the end of my.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Have a nice
see?
weekend, everybody.
Perfect
Mhm.
timing. Yeah.
I know. I was trying to watch the clock, but. All right. I'll say one more thing that I didn't say. Just the other thing I have here is we do, when we're talking about student data, we do use a progressive discipline matrix that makes that decision around like what's an assertive discipline in orange and what's a discipline issue that's being entered in areas under discipline. And so the staff have been trained as well, but this matrix lays it out. Like something that's a first time may just be a discipline entry, but if you're on the third time, it may result in an assertive discipline or the severity of it, what occurred, right? And so this tool has really helped us to not have it be a subjective measure. Like it's not about Cindy or about Sarah. It's about like we've gone through this progression and we've implemented the other means of correction that are required, and we lay those out for them as well. So a first incident occurred, there was an intervention to address the incident, it occurred again, an intervention was provided, it's a third incident, so this has been really helpful for them as well.
The restorative practices TOSA and alternative to suspension teacher, assuming there's not a student that has been suspended, are they rotating between the schools?
Yeah.
Like, where are they spending their time?
Yeah, so they're case managing each of the students. So they're doing those non-assertive disciplines. So they're meeting in the morning and they're saying, okay, these 5 kiddos came in yesterday for discipline. I'll head to New Republic. You head to La Jolla. They're checking with the teacher, checking in with the administrator. Then they're case managing any student who's been in ATS. So if a student's not just ATS, any student who's been suspended. So they're going to the site, doing the check-in with the student, and case managing them through. So yeah, if Chelsea's not, excuse me, in the classroom with an ATS student, then they're out at all the sites. And even if there is a student there, there'll be times where like I'll go over and take ATS so that they can go out and do case management, because sometimes it's just a 20-minute check-in with a kiddo, and those kiddos get accustomed to having that check-in with them as well to kind of keep them on track, more so for that positive reinforcement of them of like, great job, you're still hanging in there.
Any other board questions? Otherwise, I'm going to move to close. Yeah, just as they mentioned, there's additional data. Any last questions?
No, I have none. Thank you, ladies, for showing that. And just once again, like I think it's super important, especially like Jacob's gone, but like myself and Jacob that we're not, in education and sometimes don't understand. Like, thank you guys for putting that in, Sarah, like when you emphasize it's not apples to apples, because then you do see it and you're like, wait a minute, it doesn't kind of make sense. Like,
Yeah.
why are we, and then this doesn't match. So thank you for emphasizing on that. It's always really good. I like these workshops when we come because it gives us the overall of like how the students are doing. And then one thing that I noticed going over these slides at home was like, and I want to shout out to, it's like, we know for a fact, like the 2 schools that you guys chose, those 2 schools, Santa Rita and Gavilan View, are the ones that usually need the most, and it's the feeding school. But I also noticed like those schools, like Becky showed, I saw that like there's a big improvement, and so I mean, I think it's really good for parents and teachers to see that, even though they are some of the schools that need the most help, there is a big improvement overall as well. So thank you guys.
Anything else, Ms. Elba?
No, I just thank you very much. And I know that our students are in good hands with our teachers, and I've gone to several not meetings, but I don't even know what it would be called. Not the walkthroughs. The one at Santa Rita where we met with the coach. There you go. Yeah. So I know that they're, really working on that. And there's another person that's coming in, and I can't remember her name. For the life of me, I can't remember. But she sits and with the teachers, calls in the teachers. I sat on it like that was it.
Yeah, the iReady
That was
site
it.
trainings.
That was,
Mhm.
and I tell you, that was a really good, and that was at Santa Rita. And the teachers, I was able to stay there for half of the morning. And they they were brought in 3 at a time, each grade level. And they were looking at their data, and it was really impressive because I could see how engaged the teachers were to know where their kids were. So, and, you know, and they were able to accept that their data was going to be up there for each class. And so they discussed, but also there was one particular teacher who really had never explored the data in that perspective. And so she got it and she says, I'm going back and I'm going to use it. So there's a lot of improvements. So I really want to thank the teachers also. Those teachers are really working hard. They really are. So, and the presentation was great. It was clear. I know exactly what's going on. So now I'm really excited about the end of the year. See how those, and I'm have faith. So
Thank you guys, and please thank everybody for all the. I know you acknowledge their hard work, and thank you for continuing to do so. And with that, I am going to motion to close the meeting.
I motion to close.
second,
Motion. All those in favor? Aye.
hi.
Aye.
Thank you.
3-0.